All right. All right, there it is. Hello, YouTube.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Keep guarding against contact with respiratory droplets from sneezes and coughs through social distancing and improved personal hygiene. Always wash your hands with soap and water and sanitize when you're unable to wash your hands. Remember to stay hydrated by drinking a lot of water too. Don't entertain visitors for now and do the responsible thing by isolating yourself if you've been exposed to an infected person. It is important to obey the stay-at-home order, as this will greatly help in containing the spread of the virus. One more thing, don't panic. Spreading unconfirmed news about COVID-19 will do more damage than good. Together as one, we will kick out coronavirus. This message is from Stanbic IBTC.
Business trends beyond the headlines.
Untitled substantial amount of capital available to invest.
Business Express on Smooth 98.1 in association with Stanbic IBTC. Stanbic IBTC. It can be.
Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. You're very welcome to today's edition of Business Express 981. I'm Ayo Mairo-Ese and I have Rotus. Morning, Rotus. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you, Ayo. Good morning to you. Good morning to all our listeners, viewers, and good morning to our special guest as well from Stanbic IBTC.
Excellent. Our special guest from Stanbic IBTC is Dolu Olugbenjo. Dolu is the head of the infrastructure fund under Stanbic IBTC Asset Management. Good morning, Dolu. Great to have you on the show.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rotus. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Excellent. Now, if you'd like to be a part of the show, if you want to watch what's going on, you can go onto our YouTube channel, youtube.com/smooth981FM. If you'd like to share the link with someone whom you think ought to be listening, then please use the share button to send to them. And then you can also send us a WhatsApp message on 0809 444 09812. Be a part of the conversation. Perhaps if you have questions, then you might want to send through that platform as well. Today, we're going to be looking at Stanbic IBTC's infrastructure fund. And who better to speak to us about it than the head of the infrastructure fund? So, Rotus, I'll hand over to you to lead on the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Ayo. Yes, Dolu, this is an incredibly important conversation, and what Stanbic is doing here, pretty important. So can you share details with us about this infrastructure fund that you're spearheading?
Thank you very much, Rotus. As you said, it's a very important product for us. It's one of the new product within the bouquet of funds managed by Stanbic IBTC Asset Management. And this is designed with a few things in mind. One of the most critical is to contribute to the efforts at solving some of the infrastructure challenges that we have. And the additional point relating to that is, beyond solving it, we thought it was an opportunity for us to galvanize capital from investors and channel those capital into the infrastructure space. It's an alternative investment. So which means that it's not your standard conventional investment, and it has its own unique nuances. And as it comes into the market, we believe certainly investors need to be aware of this new product, which then gives them more diversification benefits relative to the conventional investments, while at the same time chipping at some of the infrastructure challenges that we have.
Fantastic. Who doesn't want diversification and also to try and solve Nigeria's problems? Great stuff. Are you courting, mostly foreign investors, or is it a mix of domestic and foreign investors with the fund?
Indeed, it is a mix of domestic and foreign. We're looking at qualified investors, institutional investors, asset management. Those are the universe of investors we're targeting, because those are the investors that also have the wherewithal to move the needle, if I should put it that way. So they're just not domestic investors, but also foreign investors alike.
Great stuff. And do you have a target in mind for when the fund will launch and become operational?
The fund has actually launched. We're currently in the market now. It opened on the 15th of July, the tranche one, and it closes on the 25th of August. So that's the window for this first tranche. But the fund is designed in such a way as we originate new transactions, we come to the investors to raise money. And so we will be in the market over the, at least from now on going into the future, from time to time, tapping liquidity from investors in the market. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Nigeria has a large infrastructure deficit. Is the future of closing that deficit in the hands of the private sector, would you say?
I think it's a mix. Certainly, there's a role for private sector to play in closing that deficit. There's also an opportunity, I should say, and private capital, private sector certainly seeks to optimize opportunities wherever it exists. So I think that there is a mix. We certainly need government to catalyze investment, to make to provide an enabling environment, and private sector will play its role. And so I think it's about time for private sector, capital within the private sector to be galvanized and channeled into infrastructure, whilst we're also holding government accountable to come to the table in terms of enabling policies and the like. So it's a collaborative effort, I should say.
Interesting.
And how would you gauge the, I guess, the success of the fund? Do you have any metrics that you have in mind with respect to how launching and so on?
Yeah, what we tell our investors is because we're an alternative investment allocation or investment fund, the benchmark we give to them for considering that investing in our fund is the FGN 10-year yield. And so and the theory there is that the safest instrument from a long-term perspective is theoretically the FGN bond. And so we are saying to them that benchmark us against that, measure us against that benchmark, and we would strive to at least always beat that benchmark from whether it's 200, 300 basis points per year, depending on what the macro is. And that's the reference point for this fund.
All right, thank you. So what important points do you think the public, so our listeners, thank you for breaking it down to us in terms of the fund, but what do you think the public needs to be aware of when funds like yours, the infrastructure fund, is launched? What kind of things should we be taking note of?
Thank you. I think first thing is that the infrastructure challenges that we have cannot be left to the government alone. And we have now created a platform that allows us to collaboratively work with government to solve those problems. And those problems are quite enormous in our context. There's $30 trillion of investments in CapEx that is needed over the next 50 years or so. We all know what the gaps are in our daily lives in terms of infrastructural challenges. And now we're coming out with a product that allows investors come into the market to support this effort. So that's a very important point. I think the second important point is to then begin to engage, the public, the sponsors, project evaluators, consultants. They then need to engage government at the various levels to be promoting the right projects, because eventually those projects will come to the capital markets, which is where we are practitioners, and then we will raise money. So you need the right sponsors to pretty much engage government to start having that dialogue, advocacy around projects that are beneficial to the people, that will lift us up and give us a very great impetus into our development goals. So those are two significant reasons. Of course, there are other reasons that the other thing that the public needs to be aware of. But starting with those two, and then it kind of dovetails and crystallizes across.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question from one of our listeners, but in case you're just tuning in, it's of course, it's Business Express 981, and we're speaking to Dolu Olugbenjo from Stanbic IBTC's Asset Management. He's the lead on the infrastructure fund, and he's just giving us and breaking it down for us, giving us an insight into what the fund is about, and asking some, perhaps responding to some of the questions that some people might have about that fund. Now, we have from I think it was Kunde. Yes, Kunde is asking you, Dolu, will Stanbic IBTC give the funds to the government to build the infrastructure? And how will you ensure funds are used for exactly that? And this question is premised on the fact that, under the question as to how will the fund translate to actual infrastructure like good roads?
Yeah, it's a good question. We won't give the money to government. It's our investors' money, and they trust us to manage it on their behalf. What we will do is, there are many Nigerians and international sponsors, consultants, entrepreneurs that have projects, and they would have done the work with government. What we seek to do is to make sure that those projects are bankable, they are viable, the rights and the benefits have been transferred to the private sector from government. The policies are in place, the contracts are watertight. And when all of those are in place, that's when we come in to then provide financing or investments on behalf of our investors. So we're not going to be giving investors money to the government. That's not the premise. It is more to work with them to originate those transactions.
Excellent. Thanks. That's very reassuring. Another question here from DJ Chooks. It says, what is the return in this fund and how does one buy into it? What is the outlook for it?
The outlook for the fund is positive. As I said earlier, the deficits in the infrastructure space is enormous. And so we are now looking to find ways to unlock those opportunities for the benefit of our investors. The return dynamics is what I also mentioned, which is we want our investors to measure us against the FGN 10-year bond. With the return on the FGN 10-year bond, and we strive to provide a premium of anywhere from 200 to 500 basis points above that. And so that gives you a sense. Whenever you look at the Rotus and see whatever the government bond is trading at any point in time, just realize that we will be at a premium to that because we are taking an increased risk relative to that particular paper. And so that's kind of the return dynamic.
All right, Rotus, I know you have a question, but let me take one more from our
listeners.
Go ahead. Henry Emmanuel is on this one. He's asking, does the fund have special provisions for green projects?
Yes, we have. Given where we are in the world now, and the emphasis on green energy and clean energy, we certainly have that in mind. As a member of the Standard Bank Group and Stanbic IBTC Holdings, we have a very great focus on making sure that all our investments are environmentally sustainable, that we have the clean energy initiative in mind, and we're signatories to many of the multilateral agreements that encourages clean investment. So this is also not left out.
Excellent. All right, let me squeeze in one from Omola. Omola is asking, what is the tenure of this fund?
This particular tranche that we're in the market for is a 10-year tenor with an option for 2 years. The benefit for our type of fund for investors and even for project sponsors is that we're not constrained by tenor. If the project requires 10 years, we come to the market to raise 10. If it's 15, if it's 20, if it's 25, we would have those dialogues and justify why we need to go those longer tenors for our investors. So this particular tranche is 10 years, but we could do more if the projects were answered.
Great stuff.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Hey, look, the awesome audience questions. The audience owns this show, so they can continue asking as many questions as they like.
Talking about the audience owning the show, they have a suggestion for you, Dolu. It's up to you to determine if you take it or not. Otunuga thinks that the first project you should work on is the rail line from Lagos to the east. If you get approval for that, it will be oversubscribed, he said. And then Joel is asking how much one needs to invest in this fund.
Thank you. The minimum investment under this first tranche is 10 million naira. And that's why we're having those conversations. 10 million naira as a minimum investment.
Okay. And would this from Ladele Johnson, sorry, Rotus, you're going to get a word.
Hey, please.
I'm the voice of the people. All right. So Ladele Johnson is asking that he believes the fund, would the fund be traded on the Nigerian exchange?
Eventually, in time, when we are fully invested, the fund will be considered to be listed. We want to make sure that we are fully invested, which then allows us to have to allow the investors to have a suite of exposures to different sectors. So as we go along, we'll assess the timeline or the timing for listing, but it's not immediately, but in due course, it will certainly be listed, yes.
All right, thank you. Rotus.
Great stuff. Oh, look, only a minute to go. Yeah, just a minute to go. Dolu, is infrastructure Nigeria's #1 priority? I know there's a lot of issues in the country, but would you put it at #1?
Arguably, Rotus, it is #1. There are many issues, as you say, but focus on infrastructure, and perhaps some of these other issues will start chipping away. If people can have the right infrastructure within the country, maybe many of the social issues we face will kind of melt away in time. Yes.
Great stuff.
Okay, I think we have 20 seconds. Let me squeeze in this last question because I think Emmanuel would really like to ask, how and when is the return on investment paid? When?
Okay, the investment is made. The first tranche is going to be made. It's going to close on the 25th of August. And once that investment is made, every 6 months, you get a return based on the distributions we make. And those return distributions will continue for the tenure of the fund. So you can expect to get distributions every 6 months under this fund. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much. We've been speaking with Dolu Olugbenjo, who is the head of the infrastructure fund under Stanbic IBTC Asset Management. And thanks to all our listeners for your questions and making the conversation definitely richer. Thank you, Rotus, as well. Tomorrow morning, we're back for another edition of Business Express 981. And this time will be a Tech Friday edition. So we'll be focusing on technology. So stay tuned or join us for that conversation. Once again, Dolu, thank you very much for being a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Right. Have a good one.
Good morning. Have a good one. All right. We are going to continue the show, that Smooth Breakfast Show. However, we have a music run. So don't go anywhere. We have some great music lined up for you. And then at 7:30, we're here for today's edition of Freshly Pressed 981, serving you newspaper headlines fresh and hot with detailed analysis here on Smooth 98.1. Stay tuned.
Trends beyond the headlines.
We've had a substantial amount of capital.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.